If you're trying to produce food for your family in your backyard or in whatever garden plot you have access to, and you live in a climate where you get snow dumped on you and you get consistently freezing temperatures, it can be tricky. It's not impossible, and surely you can grow some things inside. We grow mushrooms, we grow microgreens and sprouts, that kind of thing. We even grow some little micro dwarf tomatoes, tiny bush cucumbers. We try to get special little harvests like that throughout the winter as well. But we also try to grow food outside year round, and we don't have fancy expensive infrastructure. We don't have a greenhouse, heated or not. We don't even have glass cold frames. We're working with just some plastic sheeting over raised beds with these hoops. This system works great for extending your season into fall, and then for starting your season earlier in spring. It works amazingly for that. But in the deep winter, especially this year, where we've had consistently very cold temperatures, things do freeze eventually to the point of no return. There are some crops though that we always get back in the spring. We can find them if we dig through the snow. They're still there. One of those is spinach, and there are some varieties that are better than others for withstanding prolonged freezing temperatures. And then our root crops, so things like parsnips, turnips, beets, even carrots, these can be fine in the soil over winter. If the soil is very, very well mulched, then they can even maintain some of their crispness, again, depending on variety. This year has been so cold. This January, we've had just, minus 20 Celsius regularly, never going above freezing in the day. I think maybe this weekend we're supposed to get a day where it's 0 degrees Celsius, so hovering around the freezing mark. And I'm going to adjust some of our raised bed systems to accommodate that. I know that most of the things in here are now done. Either we've eaten them or they have frozen and turned to mush. But we do still have spinach that's doing great. And there's some root crops in here too, some baby turnips that should still be fine by spring, as long as they're really well mulched. So my biggest issue right now is the fact that the soil is going to dry out in here as the days do start to creep up above freezing again. The row covers exclude any moisture, and so my priority right now is to remove the plastic. It's no longer trapping any heat. It's no longer extending growing season. All it's doing is keeping moisture out of the soil. The snow is actually going to insulate the spinach crop just as well as this plastic would. And you can dig through the snow and pick spinach and it should still be good to go. And then in the spring when that snow melts, it properly hydrates your soil. And snow, just like rainfall, has a lot of nitrogen in it from the atmosphere. This is stuff that you want soaking in to your soil. So we're gonna go ahead and remove our row covers. It is the last day of January right now when I'm filming this, so heading into February. And in other beds, I have row covers on other beds as well. We're going to remove from the rest, and then in probably the first week of March, I'm going to be putting row covers back on, because that's when temperatures are going to be enough above freezing during the day to actually warm that soil. Daylight is going to be stronger and last for longer, so that's when we can do the extending of the season again using this plastic row cover, and then we can start growing things earlier in the spring. So for now, we're going to remove our plastic. All right, so you can see the soil is very, very dry. It needs the snow to fall on it now. We ate most of the pak choy, but there's a couple down at the end there that went yucky. Actually, the chickens might still enjoy those. And this was the Rouge d'Hiver. It's a red romaine. It was supposed to be good for winter growing, but clearly not for Ontario winter. It lasted until, I think, around Christmas time. It started to rot. So So it wasn't a great like overwintering lettuce, although it was great for fall. It did grow nice and strong through lots of frosts. So our spinach is still fine. This is the giant winter organic spinach from West Coast Seeds. This is the Popeye spinach. I've grown Popeye for many years, and it's a spinach that I can just dig through the snow and pick. And then under here we've got some more lettuces, Quatre de Saison. I'm just gonna pull this frost fabric over. You don't need to do this, but why not add one little permeable layer of protection. I have a couple more beds with covers on them. I haven't really decided yet what to do about the bed that has kale and stuff in it, little baby kales. You really have to follow the weather patterns when you're trying to grow food in the winter like this. And we're not growing food right now, I should be clear. We are maintaining food in like a outdoor fridge, basically, outdoor freezer. I'm pretty sure everything in here at this point has had just too much consistent freezing. It's been so cold for so long that I don't think anything in here is still, none of the greens or anything like that are still going to be edible. They're probably going to have gone to mush by now. The roots will be fine. It's the baby kales that I'm wondering about. Mature kales can survive all winter long. Even if the foliage dies back, the plant will send up its flower stalk in the spring. They're biennials. However, once it sends up its flower stalk, you don't really get the tender green leaves anymore, and it does only live 2 years. So what I don't want to happen is for these baby kales to think that next year is their second year of life. These were planted in October, I think, maybe September. So technically next year, next spring is supposed to be their first year of life. Kind of messing with nature's cycles a little bit, but these are the kind of experiments that you have to do year after year and just see what works. So in this bed, we have baby spinach, which is still alive and fine, and this stuff's going to take off growing again in the spring, as long as we don't get excruciatingly cold spells that last for a really long time again. But at this rate, heading into February, I think the coldest month is done. We should be seeing these coming back with full vigor first thing in the spring, really early in the spring. And yes, they'll go to seed fairly early on, like maybe a month after growing, but it'll be our earliest spinach. We won't have to start it inside. There's also some carrots here that are frozen completely into the ground. Those should be fine. They might be a little on the mushier side, almost as if you had harvested them and then put them in your freezer and then pulled them out to use. But sometimes you get lucky and the roots maintain their crispness in the spring. It's due to a lot of variables, including like the variety that you're growing, and also how cold your winters were, how much insulation you had. Raised beds are actually a little trickier for winter growing because they are up above the ground and the cold air gets in from the sides. Ideally, if you can do this, I encourage you to build in-ground cold frames. So if you've got straw bales, that's bonus, or like old hay bales, and you build a frame with those, and then you put like a nice double paned glass recycled window on top of that. If you can angle it towards the sun, towards the south, then like even better. I don't have that set up here at this point. We're growing in raised beds. And the row covers are the best that I can do in this setup. And for the most part, it gets us fresh produce into December, sometimes into early January. But again, at this point, we've just had too long of too cold, and a lot of things are finally giving up. But in the spring, some of the stuff is going to bounce back like fresh. Beets here. Wonder if I should try to hack it out of the ground. There was a time a couple years ago where I was looking for some carrots for a soup, and I knew I had carrots in the garden, and this was probably like 6 years ago when we still had cold winters like that, like this, consistently. And I actually went out with an ice pick and I hacked the carrot out of the soil. It was so frozen in there, and it came out in pieces, but it was a beautiful huge carrot, and it was perfect for our stew or our soup or whatever it was. So you can definitely do that. Baby spinaches, baby kales. So these are the things that I'm hoping are gonna actually appreciate the nice snow layer of insulation. And you can tell by looking at the soil that it is dry, it is thirsty, even though it's been consistently freezing. Without a snowfall on it, the soil will dehydrate. And so come spring, I want it to have a nice layer of snow to melt on it. In this bed here, I've actually got a ton of turnips, ton of turnips still, and some beets. And I hope that as soon as it thaws enough, you know, if we get 2 days of just above freezing, I'm going to come in and I'm going to harvest these and I'm going to preserve them, because they can get a little bit mushy by the time spring really rolls around. Again, it depends on a lot of factors, on the variety that you've planted, on the snow load you've had to insulate. Like this has a great layer of insulation on it right now, that bed. The constant freeze thaw cycles. So we're going to check them out as soon as I can and potentially bring those in and preserve them, do some pickling or something. Okay, I got one more bed. I don't want to leave the plastic just laying out here in the freezing cold, but it is frozen down, so I can't lift it up. There's some nice looking beets in that bed, and I don't know, there's maybe like 3 or 4 of them left, and a couple carrots. You can definitely collect seeds from things like beets if you leave them in the ground over winter. In the spring, they'll send out flower stalks and produce seeds for you. They're biennials, so you grow them in year 1 and you harvest all the roots from them, but if you leave any in the ground, they overwinter, they send up their flowers the next year, and then they die after they've reproduced. If you want to save seeds from carrots though, it's a little trickier. Carrots are also biennials and will send up their seed stalks in the spring or next summer, but carrots readily cross-pollinate with wild carrots. You have to be like a ridiculous distance, I forget how far, but an absolute ridiculous distance from any wild carrots, which in Ontario is impossible because they're everywhere. They're on all the roadsides. And so it's really hard to save seeds from carrots. Even if you try to exclude them from any external pollen, like from any wild carrots, apparently flies are their pollinator. I've never seen flies pollinating carrots before, but they're the pollinators. And so I've chatted with a seed farmer one time who told me that they put like rotting meat around their carrots in their enclosed tunnel so that it attracts flies to do the pollinating of these carrots. Super gross. I'm not gonna do that in my garden, but it's kind of interesting. Gross but interesting. Aren't all the gross things kind of interesting? Anyway, all the raised beds now are uncovered, and we're gonna let the snow fall on them so that in another month, maybe 6 weeks, when that melt happens and spring is here, all that snow just gets added to the soil. All of the nutrients in that water just get released into the soil. So good night, garden. Rest well. If we get a couple thaws in the near future, I'm going to come out and harvest some things if I can get into the soil. Otherwise, I'm really looking forward to the spring growth on the spinach and the sorrel and the kales. They'll be up first in March. Yeah, I guess that's it. Nothing else to do out here. except for sit around and enjoy the beauty. Although my feet are getting cold, even with 2 pairs of wool socks. So I guess it's time to go in. Thanks for joining me as we did a little bit of garden maintenance here in Zone 6A under ice and snow in Ontario. I hope that you'll come and grow with us.